Let's bring in our reporters and analysts who've been inside the courthouse this week. NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vossoughian, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, and former federal prosecutor and former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief Christy Greenberg. So, Yasmin.
Yes.
Let's talk about where we left off and your top takeaways from her testimony so far.
So you mentioned it. They're going to pick up cross-examination tomorrow and then likely redirect after that. It was, I think all of us can agree, a stunning day in court yesterday morning as it was revealed that Stormy Daniels was going to be the second witness on that stand call just after 90 minutes after court began. And what was incredible about the cross-examination, how we ended yesterday, was kind of how Susan Necheles was kind of going after Stormy Daniels. And some of the final questions that she asked was, and I'm paraphrasing here, are you just trying to extort Donald Trump, right? Are you just lying about every story that you're telling here on the stand? And it seemed as if Stormy Daniels, that moment, was standing up for herself, right? The first time she felt like she could publicly, with Donald Trump sitting just 8 feet away from her, in which she said, no, I'm not. This is not about money. I just wanted to get the story out there. I felt unsafe, and I'm not trying to extort the former president, right? Kind of painting this picture of Stormy Daniels that she had really an axe to grind. If I can paint for you a picture, Anna, of what that courtroom was like, right? Stormy Daniels walking in behind Donald Trump, behind the defense table, her hair up in a banana clip. The top of her hair was blonde. The bottom of her hair was black. She had a black hoodie on. Not the Stormy Daniels that we have all come to know very well publicly. This was not the person that we saw on the stand. And she told story after story, and she was chided, as you mentioned, oftentimes by Judge Juan Merchan, to stick to the answers, listen to the questions, and give us succinct answers. And the jury was kind of picking up on that energy as well. The thing is, though, we have seen interviews of Stormy Daniels repeatedly on, for instance, 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper, and she has this tendency to drone on. So whether or not that meant she was nervous or not was really kind of in question. I think also what was stunning was how they finished direct. And it was a tweet from the former president of the United States and saying, I don't know this woman. This never happened. She's out to get me. And it was in direct contradiction to the detailed account that Stormy Daniels took us through that entire morning. It was a stunning day.
So, Lisa, did we really learn anything new from Stormy Daniels' testimony? And how do you think the prosecution is feeling about calling her to the stand?
Well, look, if you're a Stormy Daniels junkie and you've read her book and you watched the documentary and you've seen the 60 Minutes interview that Yasmin was referring to, much of yesterday was not new to you at all. But that's not where prosecutors find this jury. Remember, most of these people were selected because, against the backdrop of other people who could have been chosen, they appeared to know less, or at least be less invested emotionally in the facts of this case, as many people in the public are familiar with, than other people that could have been chosen. I felt like I learned something new because the cast on the story that Stormy Daniels told yesterday was not this lighthearted romp that we've come to understand it as, but a much darker tale of predatory conduct by the former president that fits neatly on and maps onto that Access Hollywood tape. This is a person who is entitled, who had schemed out the whole thing, who answers the door to his hotel penthouse in Tahoe in satin pajamas until she says to him, go change. She thinks they are literally going to have dinner. 2+ hours later, all she's had is a glass of water, at which point she excuses herself to go to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she finds the former president literally lying in wait for her on the bedroom bed. And so I thought that the feeling I walked away with yesterday was a different one than we've all come to understand as a culture about Stormy Daniels. This is a person who felt preyed upon, even if she might not characterize it as a sexual assault, a person who disassociated from the experience in her head as it was happening. I can't help but think that the jurors would be impacted by that. And on closing argument, if the prosecutors can tie that neatly together with what was happening in the campaign day by day, starting October 7th with the release of the Access Hollywood tape, I think the jurors will really be impacted by what the world would have looked like had Stormy Daniels told the story she told yesterday in October of 2016, Anna.
So her testimony, it was riveting, but this is a crime, Christy, about financial documents, not infidelity. So why do you think the prosecution needed Stormy Daniels' testimony? Did they? And what do you think they accomplished?
So I think they needed her testimony to show this is what Donald Trump paid for. This is the story he paid for the American people not to hear before the election. And so some of those details, I think, were necessary to draw out. When, it was that feeling, I mean, we're in the overflow room, so you can have more of an audible reaction. Like, there were moments of ick. There were a lot of, like, make America gag again would have been his campaign slogan if this had come out. I mean, it was disgusting. Like, yeah, the images of the Hugh Hefner pajamas and him saying, don't worry about Melania because we don't sleep in the same room anyway. And then talking to this woman who he wanted to sleep with and saying that she reminded him of his daughter, and then using a spot on a reality show to try and induce him to sleep with her. So all of that was cringe, but I think that was the point, because that would have been highly embarrassing to Trump. Where I think the prosecution overreached a bit is what Lisa's talking about, which is this darker moment where there was testimony about their height differential, that he blocked the door and was bigger than her. So, it sort of indicated she didn't say she couldn't leave, but there was that sort of undercurrent that maybe she couldn't.
And that could be problematic for the prosecution?
Yes, because he is not on trial for sexual assault, and sexual assault is much more serious than falsified business records, which on its own is a misdemeanor. So when you have damaging testimony that's highly inflammatory, that could be far more prejudicial to the jury than probative of this story. And so I think some of those details, I'm surprised that the state elicited those. It didn't seem necessary to tell the story. And I do think that in order to cure this and make sure there's not a hung jury, there needs to be a limiting instruction here that this factual dispute, there's no factual dispute about whether the sexual assault was consensual. Something along those lines need to be said. I also think the state could do some work on redirect to clean some of that up so that it's very clear that she's not being threatened. They got some of that, but then it was undercut in other parts. It needs to be cleaner.
Anna, could I just add on to what Chrissy just said about the falsifying of the documents? Because I think also what was so interesting about yesterday was the testimony from the publisher earlier in the day, right, using Donald Trump's words against him and kind of connecting back the testimony that we got from Stormy Daniels and saying, look, this is what happened, right? And then the prosecution wanting you to say to yourself, or the jury to say to itself, okay, this is what happened. If we believe this is what happened, right, then why would a man who has coached millions of people how to be a billionaire, who is incredibly frugal down to the paperclip, who signs every check, right, why would he pay out this money and then gross up Michael Cohen, his attorney, right? Why would he pay $420,000, right? Give him double if, in fact, he is so incredibly frugal. Is it because of the story that the woman that followed the publisher just told, Stormy Daniels? And if you believe her, that's what the prosecution wants you to do, then, in fact, you believe Donald Trump's words and you take them for what they mean.
And you realize how damaging those details could have been had the voters had access to that information. Of course, Donald Trump was there listening to this. As you point out, Yasmin, just 8 feet away. We're learning from the transcripts that Trump at one point was reacting strongly to her testimony, swearing in court, apparently, the judge calling a sidebar. So jurors couldn't hear. People who were in the courtroom couldn't hear what he was saying. But we're learning that he told Trump's attorney, quote, I understand that your client is upset at this point, but he is cursing audibly and he is shaking his head visually, and that's contemptuous. It has the potential to intimidate the witness, and the jury can see that. Lisa, were you able to hear any of the apparent comments that Trump was making or see his face or reaction?
No, I didn't. It was obvious that at points he was upset. I didn't see him mouth the words that he is alleged to have spoken, the cursing, and I didn't obviously hear it. That having been said, it's totally consistent with how Trump behaved at the second of the E. Jean Carroll trials, where he had a similar skirmish with Judge Lou Kaplan about very demonstrative behavior when E. Jean Carroll was on the stand, banging on the table, saying visibly not true, almost taking pains to exaggerate those words coming out of his mouth so that he could be seen by the jury, mouthing, not true, never happened, I don't even know the woman. Those kinds of mumblings we saw in that trial, that also provoked some sharp indignation from Judge Lou Kaplan then. The issue here, Anna, to the extent that Trump gets disciplined, it's not a gag order problem. These are in-court statements, not extrajudicial. But as Judge Merchan reminded the defense at the beginning of the case, Trump has a right to be in court unless and until his behavior becomes so disruptive that it interferes with the administration of justice. If and when that point comes, Judge Merchan has the right to eject him from the courtroom. So this is a warning that that could come if this kind of behavior continues, particularly as directed towards witnesses.